Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm just relaxing here at our little family summer home here in Connecticut. We've got this lake right here. You guys have probably seen me do some videos out here in the past. This is the lake that started it all. This is where I caught my very first bass that I remember, and this started my passion for the sport. So really excited to be here, and this is the reason why I haven't been as regular with my videos recently. We're just enjoying some family vacation time, and yeah. So today I wanted to talk about braided fishing line. So braid is a very, very important category of fishing line for especially fishing heavy vegetation. It's not as good for other types of heavy, cover, such as, hard cover, wood, brush, and things like that, because it digs into that cover. But for vegetation, there's no better line for, the thick stuff. On this lake in particular, we've got a lot of emergent grasses around the edges of the lake, and so anytime you're fishing like a frog or anything through that grass, you need to have braid. And braid, the reason why braid is so good in vegetation is because, number one, it has no stretch, or little to no stretch. It's got a little bit of stretch, I'm sure, but you won't even notice it. And so what that no stretch does is it enhances sensitivity when you're dealing with, fishing in heavy cover. But more importantly, it allows you to get good solid hook sets on the length of the cast, no matter how dense the grass is. And so it's just overall really important for getting good solid hook sets and wrenching those fish out of the cover. Another thing that braid has is it has a very, very small diameter per pound test. So compared to like monofilament or fluorocarbon, for instance, most of the packaging will actually tell you. So this 65-pound smackdown braid from Seagar has an equivalent diameter to monofilament line that is 25-pound test. So a huge difference. So you can really upsize your line size, the strength of your line, but downsize your line diameter, which is really important. And so just all those things together, and also braid tends to cut through vegetation, which is actually a point that we're going to be weighing in on pretty heavily in this video. It's actually one of the main reasons I wanted to do this video, is because, all braided lines aren't equal. They're, obviously every single one is a little bit different. A lot of lines tout, more strands in their weave, in their braid. And that a lot of lines are very, very smooth. Like the Seagar Smackdown has 8 strands. It is super, super smooth. I mean, it is as smooth as any other braided line that you will fish. And so like when I'm flipping, pitching, and punching and wanting to make really quiet presentations into things like reeds or hyacinth that can make a lot of noise as the braid passes through it, this braid right here is very, very stealthy, and I feel like I get more bites because it is smooth. But a lot of people think that the smoother the braid, the better it is for all applications. And to me, over the last, decade, I've really learned that that having a smooth braid isn't always the best choice overall for the situation. So Seagar essentially has 2 different options that I use. I've got the Seagar Smackdown we just talked about. That's 8 strands. Then they just introduced a couple years ago the Tactics braid. This has a 4-strand construction, and it has a little bit more of that like saw-like braided texture to it. It's aggressive texture. It's definitely not as smooth as the Seagar Smackdown, but it's very, very round and tight weave. It really maintains its shape very well. And what I've found over the last several years is that even though the smoother braid is the ultimate choice for, flipping, pitching, and punching techniques, going in after those fish, when it comes to making long casts over grass flats and trying to get bass through, you know, pad fields or through reeds or anything where those fish can get really tangled up in that vegetation, having a braid that has a more aggressive texture to it, you know, whatever brand it is, but this is what I like to use. You know, a more aggressive texture like the Tactics has really helps you cut and saw through that vegetation as you're trying to fight those fish back to the boat. Not only that, but I just think that the overall shape that this braid has is really conducive to longer casts. So like if I'm fishing a hollow body frog over dense vegetation, or even just casting it under, you know, skipping it under overhangs, things like that, this is a really, really good line for that because I get the extra casting distance. I also use it for, you know, my toads, fishing toads on the surface, throwing swimming worms like the turbo fatties, or you know, throwing something like a swimming, you know, like a grass swim bait, like a skinny dipper type deal. All of those things where I'm making long casts over grass flats are very, very conducive to throwing a line that has a little bit more of an aggressive texture. So it's not always the best to have a very, very smooth braid. Sometimes I really do like that you know, that real you know, ropey like texture in my braid. It's just like, you know, if you ever bought like an emergency saw, they're kind of like a cable, you know, kind of like an aggressively textured cable that you can actually saw through a piece of wood when, you know, if you have to in the wilderness. Obviously it's not the best solution for sawing, you know, a big piece of wood, but it's the same principle. A little bit more texture really allows you to cut through those grasses much, much easier. So that's just something to consider. Another thing to consider is really the line sizes. You know, I was guilty of this early on, was because the line diameter is so small per pound test. I always tended to use like 65-pound braid for everything. Now 65-pound braid is still my most used line because I use it for all my flipping, pitching, and punching tactics, and throwing like a frog over grass mats, things like that. But lately I've really started to go down in size to like 30 and 40-pound test for a lot of my you know, fast moving baits. You know, obviously 30 is a little bit light. You know, if I'm throwing it over some pretty thick, dense grass, especially if it's like real tough, stocky type vegetation, such as like arrowhead grass, maiden cane, Kissimmee grass, reeds, whatever it is. 30 is probably a little bit too small, but 40 is more than suitable. 40 and 50 are more than suitable for, you know, fishing, you know, swimming worms, swim jigs, you know, anything that you're going to be casting over, you know, these grass mats, or these grass flats rather. Grass mats, you know, if it's matted out, you want something real heavy like 65-pound. But don't be afraid to go down to like 40 and 50 for even those real heavy emergent grass flats that you would find like down in Okeechobee, or even on the shoreline here on this lake, because those tend to give you a much better, longer cast overall. But yeah, anyways, and also just want to mention, I do use braid as my main line on my spinning gear. So on my spinning reels, I will use, you know, like 15 and 20-pound test Seaguar Smackdown in the flash green. And I'm actually considering, you know, testing out the Seaguar Tactics because it has that kind of round, tight weave to it. I actually think that you actually might reduce the amount of wind knots with this more aggressive textured braid than with the Smackdown. But I've got to experiment with it a little bit. And the only thing is, the Tactics doesn't come in a flash green, and I really like that flash green, that high visibility line with my spinning gear. And then I put a long fluorocarbon leader onto that. So, But anyways, guys, that was just a discussion I wanted to have today. Let me know what you think about this topic in the comments below. And if you have any questions, obviously drop a comment below. Other than that, I'm going to be dropping a link in the description. Affiliate link gets 10% off your order, and it helps support SonarFishing, the channel. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Trust the process. I'm going to see you out on the water as soon as I'm done with family vacation.